Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Preserving History and Democracy. My name is Cynthia Mendoza, Communications Coordinator for the Johnathan County Clerk's Office. And today we have a full house, right, Bern?
We do. We've got a cozy little table here. We're just going to have a nice chat.
Yes. So today we are welcoming Probate Judge Judith Ann Baca. Yes. How are you today, Judge?
Oh, Cynthia, I'm good.
And we also have Assistant County Manager Johnathan Macias today with us, who you brought some great knowledge with you last time on probate. So we wanted to welcome you back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia and Bern. It's nice to be here with Judge Judith Baca as well.
Yes.
For those of you that don't remember, check out episode 8 of season 2, which was recorded back in March 2024.
Wow.
I talked a little bit more about my own dealings with probate and what it was like to go through that with a loved one,
right,
and some of the lessons learned. And what a difference to be here a year later.
Yes.
I know you've had some major milestones and
Yes.
changes in your life too, Cynthia, and so I'm
Yes.
excited for you. And
Thank
I think
you.
we all get to reflect on where we are. So
Yes, it's exciting. So we're going to be talking about probate today and kind of go a little bit more into detail about it. I know we kind of talked about it about a year ago, but we want to kind of just talk about it again and the importance of it.
It's truly an important piece of our office that besides the weddings you perform, which I know is the fun part, the probate is so important to the people going through it.
Yes, definitely it is. It's a end of life stage, of procedures, of legal procedures that need to be addressed, and for a lot of people it could be very overwhelming. And so I try to make it as simple as possible and as easy as possible for them to deal with, because a lot of people are still grieving, and it's difficult to have to deal with legal issues along with the grieving process.
Absolutely. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your office? You have other staff members that you have as well. So do you want to talk about yourself and them?
Well, yes. So now I'm going into my third year as probate judge after I was elected. Prior to that, I worked for the Las Cruces Police Department running the Victim Assistance Program. So I worked with a lot of victims of violent crimes. So I was, used to helping people that needed assistance in matters. And then prior to that, I worked at the district court. And my judge that I worked for then, several judges, in 28 years before I retired from the state, they handled the probate cases through district court.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so, yeah. So.
You want to talk a little bit about your staff as well? I know
Yes.
you have Norma and Natalie,
Yes.
which is she's pretty new, right?
Right, so Norma Roberts is the clerk for the probate clerk, and she is very knowledgeable. In fact, she's the one who trained me when I came on board, and so she has a lot of knowledge about probate, and she processes probates. She deals with the public, and she helps me out a lot. And then I hired Natalie Ortega, and she's my administrative assistant, and so she's learned probate pretty good too through Norma and myself, because Norma is just a wealth of information and knowledge on probate, and she enjoys doing that, and Natalie seems to be enjoying it as well. And she just came on board right before the holidays last year.
Okay.
So yeah, so she's doing real well, and she says she likes it so far.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want to, I know we talked about last time what probate is, but do you kind of want to explain again for those who aren't familiar what probate is and why you need it?
Yes, well, probate is the process of dealing with a decedent or the deceased one's estate, and to be able to transfer assets or property to their heirs or their devisees. So a lot of times people don't always leave a will or leave other things in place for the matters to be dealt with without probate. So when those things haven't been dealt with through a legal form or such, then they have to file a probate.
And there's a lot of differences, right, in terms of what probate can mean when and where it lands. So do you want to talk a little bit about what are some of the differences between the probate in the county clerk's office and the probate at district court, and how they're different and where they overlap?
Yes, so with probate in the county clerk, it's informal. We're an informal court, so I don't hold any evidentiary hearings. Because I can't make any rulings as that. So people can pick up packets, or they can download the forms from the internet, and they can fill out the forms themselves, and then submit everything that needs to accompany the actual probate forms and the documentation that is needed. And then I review everything, and if everything is included that needs to be included, and it looks to be right, then we go ahead and open the case, and then we appoint a personal representative, whoever was requesting to be appointed, if there's not any issues with family members, and then they get appointed. Versus district court, district court has a lot more authority. Of course, they can hold evidentiary hearings. They can oversee a lot of things that a probate judge can't do. Like the district court judge can actually even appoint someone who wasn't even nominated in the will, or they can review and accept a copy of a will, whereas in probate court we have to have the original will filed. Okay?
Oh gosh.
So yes, it has to be filed, and a lot of people always say, "Well, can I get my will back?" And it's like, no, the original will stays, regardless whether you file it with probate court or at district court.
Right.
All original wills stay within the court file. They can make a copy beforehand. We're going to provide them with a copy once the case is actually processed and opened, but the original will always stays with the court, because this is a court of record in that respect. But and the district court can actually decide whether a copy would be sufficient to accept.
And Cynthia, if you're okay in Bern too, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, because what I'm hearing you say is that when anybody that has gone through this, you know that sometimes it can actually be costly depending on what court it goes to.
Yes.
But what you kind of described, if you go through the probate process here at the county, it's almost like probate do it yourself or DIY.
Yes, it is. It is
and
do it yourself.
and in a way where you can think about now, while you're in all your right senses, while maybe you're not impacted by a medical condition or a diminished state capacity, mental capacity, I should say, and that you can actually provide that advance directive now to help reduce the complications and the cost. And I should also give the statement or disclaimer: we're not providing legal advice here.
No legal advice.
Just maybe some personal experience, and also what you're able to navigate, and that gift that you're able to provide for your loved ones, because this can get testy when we talk about property and assets.
Yes, it can. And that's the one thing the district court judge can always oversee. If someone is incapacitated, or they have a conservator assigned to them, or a guardian, then that's where it has to go through a district court judge, versus here in probate court, since it's informal. I can't make those judgment calls, so to speak. And of course, I'm not a licensed attorney, so I can't give any kind of legal advice. And the judge can give more direction on the legal. I can direct them maybe to the site for the probate code, and let them know that if they want to look up something, they're welcome to go to that site and look things up. But it's just general direction and guidance, versus the legal aspect from
More complicated.
legal aspect from the district court.
So
it's
no
nice.
lawyers here.
No way.
No,
We're not lawyering.
We're not lawyering.
We're
And
not
for
lawyering
that,
up.
we're going to be able to have a much better discussion. No, just kidding. No, they have their place, and it's always nice. But I will say something that it's been about a year since my last discussion, and I've actually gone through a divorce since that period. And I always tell everybody, because the first thing is to be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But no, my divorce was amicable. It was loving. And I just think about how probate can also be amicable and loving when everybody is in the right state of mind, and you're not impacted by like an emergency
You're
situation.
still on the same page.
Yeah.
And everything, right?
And so interestingly enough, and all this is public record, but my divorce was very amicable, and we even did it ourselves with the help of an attorney, because it had to go through a legal process. But I think about now that's exactly what you can do with the probate here at the county, because otherwise things can get tied up for years if you're not on top of it.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is true. And sometimes when if there's in a process of a divorce, and someone, comes in here, and it's the wife or soon to be ex-wife or ex-husband, and they're trying to say that, they're the ones who should be the personal representative, and there's going to be a dispute. As soon as I hear that there's dispute going on, whether it's through a spouse or family member, I have to at least let them know it's going to be needed to be filed at district court, or even if it's filed at probate court, and then later family members come in and state that there's, they're disputing whatever property or whatever assets there are, then I have to tell them, well, then you'll need to put that in a letter, and then I need to transfer it to district court, because I can't hold
It
an
gets more
evidentiary.
complicated once
Yes,
there's
because
disputes.
since I'm not allowed to hold an evidentiary hearing, that needs
Right.
to be decided by a district court judge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I would say that then this is more like we're all on the same page right now. We
Yes.
want to go make sure that it's written down. That way later on
Yes.
there's no complications.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So what if you want to speak to the judge? If you have a probate case here and you want to speak to the judge?
So, Bern, yes, people are allowed to come and speak to the judge. Since it's informal, all I let them know is I can't give you any legal advice. I can give you some guidance or direction. That's it. And I can actually hand them the packet. That's not a problem. The do-it-yourself packet for either with will or without will. And I can direct them to maybe other resources that they might need, whether it needs to go to the assessor's office or whether they need to maybe record something with the clerk's office or
Okay.
things of that nature. But yes, they can talk to me and they
Okay.
can talk to my staff about those same type of things. Okay. But just we always do that disclosure, and we can't give out any legal advice.
Right.
Or we can give them a list of referrals to
Lawyers.
either a lawyers, we have a list of lawyers, or to even for seniors, for programs, legal aid type programs that will help
Yeah, a
seniors.
lot of folks
Yes.
from our side of the office, the recording and filing, ask us the same kind of questions, and we always borrow some flyers and pamphlets from
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
Awesome.
good. That's good to know that
Yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
that. Yes.
we're all
have
on
to
the
let
same
people know.
page.
Yeah, we should be.
So how do you open a probate case?
Okay, so when somebody comes and says, well, I need to open a probate case because, their loved one passed away.
Right.
So then the first question we always ask is, was there a will? And if they say yes, then we give them the packet for with will. If there's not a will, then we give them the packet with no will.
Right.
Ultimately, there's certain documentation that still needs to be accompanying the packet once they fill out the forms, and that's what we go over the checklist, because there is a checklist, and it's generally, if there's a will, of course, the original will has to accompany the packet, and the original death certificate of the actual decedent. So I have to look at that, review it, and do a certificate of acknowledgement on the death certificate, which does get returned to them. The death certificate does get returned.
Okay.
It's just for the the initial filing of it. And then if they were married but no will, then I need to see a copy of a marriage license. And if there's any other deceased immediate family members, I can see copies of their death certificates if they don't have the original death certificate.
Okay.
If there's no death certificate yet, because sometimes the state takes a little while, the
Right.
Bureau of Vital Statistics, then they can actually get a letter from the funeral home, and that can accompany to just get the probate open, especially if they're going to need to access maybe a bank account or
Right.
something. Yeah.
So, Judge Judy, it sounds like one of the core services that you provide here is you kind of demystify and you make the process. You're kind of like their advocate
Yes.
through that process, especially for very complicated
Yes.
terms and processes here at the county, especially for a very sensitive topic. And you talked about what happens when you give them a packet for you have a will or you have no will.
Yes.
When you have no will, how do you determine who has a priority to be the representative in that situation?
So priority is established first, like if they're married, of course it's going to be the spouse, the surviving spouse. If there's no surviving spouse, but they had children, then the children, but then they'll have equal priority. So then there's renunciations or consent forms that also have to be signed by the other siblings if there's just children. And then it goes so forth. Then it'll go to the parents if there's no children and no spouse, a surviving spouse. Then if there's no surviving parents, then it goes to grandparents, and if not, then to siblings, that kind of thing. So there's a pyramid process of it. So generally we ask those kind of questions just so we make sure that they're on the right track, and if so, then what they might need, so we can say, okay, well, you're going to need to, we have these consent forms, so you're going to need to have them sign this in front of a notary, and then you'll have to submit that with your packet. But generally, if it's a surviving spouse, all they have to provide is a marriage license, a copy of the marriage license, and a death certificate of their deceased spouse. So it makes it a little easier. So there's some general questions we ask them. And it's true what you said, Johnathan. I guess because I was an advocate for so while, I feel like I'm still doing advocacy work in this line of work, and I really feel that it's a need to do that and to inform the public and let them know that they can do this, and it doesn't have to be so traumatic either, because they're already dealing with the loss of their loved one.
Well, and the other thing, because New Mexico is a neighboring state. You might come across people that actually had a life outside of the state, and maybe they
Yeah.
held property or they had
Yes.
other marriages, and that's just a little bit of a plug to go back and listen to that other episode
Right.
because I remember even in Texas and how community property works differently over there, especially if you have a sibling from another marriage, and that just like puts a whole nother flow chart into the process. But I'm
Yes.
sure when it gets that complicated, that's when you're like, you're gonna have to go to the courts.
Well, and generally probate has to be filed where the decedent domiciled first. So if a lot of people here might have passed in Texas because they might have been in a hospital or even with a family member, but if they own property here and they domiciled here for the most part, then it's going to be filed here.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how we usually also ask them, where did they live? You know,
Right.
where was their home? And generally that's how we can decide whether they lived in El Paso and they actually lived there, but they had property here. Then that's all. They'll have to file the probate in Texas, and then they can have do a proof of authority for that later to get them to be able to do anything with the property here.
Okay. Cool.
About how long does the probate process take?
It can be as quick as maybe 6 months, or it can go indefinite. Informal probates in the probate court do not have to be closed.
Oh, they don't.
They do not have to be closed. So, as an informal probate in the probate court, if someone wants to leave it open indefinitely, that's perfectly fine. We do not close the cases ourselves. They just remain indefinitely opened. It's different from the district court because the judges are mandated through Supreme Court to close their cases, especially civil cases, and probate is a civil case. So they have to follow the Supreme Court laws for that. So they will schedule hearings and find out, okay, to move things along on their docket because
Right.
they know they have to be closed. But then they're going to have a hearing and find out what's going on or what hasn't been done yet, so they can move it faster. With us, it can just stay indefinite. 6 months is because we have to make sure the personal representative has had enough time to take care of the tasks that they have been, they have actually been appointed to do, and so some of those things can take. Some people move faster than others depending
Right.
on who it is that they're dealing with as far as the decedent, and some can deal with those things faster or will want to move through it quickly so they can move forward with their lives. So they can do them within 6 months, but generally, I like to tell people, take your time. A year is a good time. I feel like 6 months to a year is really a sufficient amount of time to try to make sure that property has been transferred, debts have been taken care of, the taxes have been filed.
Right.
Depending when the person passed away, you still have to deal with that if it's within the year, and just to make sure that they have time, because once you do close a probate with the probate court, the personal representative loses their authority as of the appointed personal representative. And so if something comes up later on and they said, oh, well, I got this letter or this notification that there was funds I didn't know about from the deceased, well, then they're going to have to file at district court and start the process all
Oh,
over
that's
again.
awful.
And then I lose my jurisdiction to
Right.
overseeing that case. So
Right.
that's why I tell them, don't be in a hurry unless they didn't have any debts at all and there was just something kind of minimal that they had to tend to, usually like transferring property if it wasn't a joint tenants deed. But otherwise, I just tell people, just take your time and make sure everything has been cleared before you close it.
That makes sense. What kind of information do you need to bring with you in the probate process? Is there any kind of documents you should bring with you if you're gonna?
Okay, well,
Start
if
the
they're
process.
ready to start it and if they already have filled the packet out because they downloaded it from our website, with under the clerk's office, as long as they have, like I said, the death certificate or a letter from the funeral home if it's kind of soon and they haven't had an opportunity to get the death certificates in, and a will if there's going to be a will, a process with a will, and a copy of a marriage license, and then of course their photo ID, because we have to make a copy of the person who's requesting to be appointed as the personal representative, and then the filing fee.
Okay. Well, not too bad.
Not too bad, and it's all on the checklist too. That's on the website.
Our website.
Yes.
And we'll go ahead and make sure kind of to plug in
Yes.
how it looks on our website and everything
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Cool.
Well, and I think this is a good reminder as spring is rolling in and we're all thinking about the things that we want to clean and get in order. I just am remembering I've not updated my will since my latest life change, and so that means that things that maybe shouldn't intended to be going to one
Yeah.
person anymore, although we have a great relationship, that we should all be looking at that again and trying to maybe come in and look at these forms at now.
Well,
We-
one thing you could do, and if you had everything pretty much in your will the way you want it to be, but just make this change as far as to who you want to appoint as your personal representative or who you want to get a certain asset or piece of property, you could add a codicil, and you can just either see an attorney about adding a codicil if everything else is the same way that you want it to be, or you can even do your own. You know, you can just. There's a lot of websites that show you how to do these things, and there are a lot of people that are capable of doing these things on their own.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not as complicated as it sounds. Sometimes people just get tripped up on the legal stuff on it, but
Right.
And I think it's because they say, "Oh, it's a legal document,"
Yeah.
and so a lot of people even say, "You mean I can write on it?" And I can, yeah. And if they bring them in and like, oh, "Okay, you've neglected to fill this blank out," because we look them over so that we hopefully don't have to have them come back again.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Or is that the date doesn't match from where it says the date that they passed, or in the day that you put on the form? Oh, okay. So just scratch through it and initial it and put the right date. Oh, I can do that. Yes, you can, because it's informal. And another thing I wanted to also mention is that these same forms that we have that were approved by Supreme Court,
Right.
they can also be used at the district court, and they
Okay.
will accept those same forms at the district court.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes.
Cool.
That is good to know.
Yeah.
What makes a will legal here in New Mexico?
Well, what makes a will legal? Okay, it has to be an original, because like for probate court, I can't accept a copy, and it has to be the person making the will, the testator making the will, has to sign it in front of two witnesses. The two witnesses have to witness their signature, and of course, they have to have been of sound mind and at the time that they were making their will. They can do their own will, a holographic will. They can do it on their own. New Mexico no longer requires that a will be notarized, but a notary can act as one of the witnesses.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
convenient.
So as long as there's two witnesses, if there's only one witness, they have to take it to district court for that judge to decide whether they'll accept it with only one witness.
Okay.
I think one of the things, because you've talked about how you kind of demystified and you've also made this a little bit more approachable, I think, because a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about this topic because it means that we have to face that one day we won't be here.
Right.
And I think in all of that, what I learned most of all is that we do have people that we can come to work with. You talked a little bit about how we can record deeds for that joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. And in instances where people have that as their biggest asset, whether it's just a home and a vehicle, you can save yourself a lot of expense depending on how you prepare now, which I think is
Right.
one of the big things to know is that at the end of the day, whether it's us as county officials and local government servants, we just want to be able to make things more accessible for the people that are here and make sure they
Yes.
feel taken care of in their time of need.
Right, so then that's what we also have information on a transfer on death deed, which we also call a TOD. That's the acronym, and that's for people that they already lost a spouse, and the surviving spouse is saying, "Well, I want my children to make sure they get the home, the property." Well, and we'll just say, well, you can read about the transfer on death, and you can get those forms at an office supply store. We don't provide those because it is a deed, a legal document, but they can get that. They can fill out what needs to be filled out and who they want to transfer the property to, and then they can just come and record the transfer and death deed. Of course, it has to be done before they pass. So then when they do pass, all the children or child needs to do is come in and record the death certificate, and it will automatically transfer that property without them having to go through probate.
Okay.
So that makes it a little simpler.
That's a
too.
lot simpler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about the
You're
importance of probate and kind of, I feel like this was a great conversation to kind of make it less of a scary topic. I know it sounds like
Right.
such a scary topic, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, and that's why I also like to go out in the community when people have invited me to come and do a presentation. I do that, and I've done it with realtors as well because there's a lot involved with real estate, and I want to ask questions about what's the probate process in case they're dealing with one of their clients that might have property where there's somebody that's passed and yet the property wasn't dealt with. So, I have to kind of explain how they have to go through probate. But I like doing that because I feel it's important to let people know the sooner you try to take care of some of these things before you pass, the easier it will be for the family because it could get very strenuous and then family start having discourse and issues if there's members that don't always agree with what's going on.
Yeah.
So if you can do it while you're still alive, as far as taking care of the properties part of it and doing a will, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't actually have to see an attorney to do a will. There's a lot of do-it-yourself forms on the internet, or you can even just handwrite one, but as long as it's you sign and it's witnessed by two witnesses, that can attest to it, makes it a little easier.
It's very helpful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad. That's what I'm here for. I'm trying to make sure I let people know that they can come to us and ask us some basic questions, and we can give them some direction and guidance on it.
Oh, real quick, you do have office hours that you maintain, and when it's a good time to come in and see it, do you want to share with the listeners?
Yes. Well, since my position's part-time, I come in the afternoons, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I'm generally try to be here between 12 and 1, and then I'm here till 5. My staff is here Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, and on Friday, 9 to 1. We are now open now on Fridays again from 9 to 1 now that Natalie's
Right,
on board.
right.
So that's made a big difference, I think, for the public because people would come before them and then there was nobody here. So I wanted to make sure that we had at least offered some assistance during part of the day on Friday.
Great.
And we'll go ahead and put some contact information as well, just so everybody can get in contact with you, just in case, or your office if they want to start the process. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us so much. Thank you to Judge Judy Baca, and thank you to Johnathan Macias for joining
course,
us.
always.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it, guys.
Thank you, Bern.
This was great.
Yes, this has been the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. We'll see you next time.